The box sat on the table like it didn't belong. Wrapped in gold foil, a crisp white ribbon tied so neatly it could have been done by machine. I stared at it while the coffee cooled in my hands, the porch light still flickering behind me, the quiet hum of morning birds fading into something heavier. "Happy Father's Day, Dad," from Samantha Peter. The card was tucked beneath the bow, its red ink trying too hard, trying to remind me of love, of what we used to be. I'd just walked in from the porch, still in my slippers, when I found it waiting like an uninvited guest. I don't know why, but something in me paused. The air in the room seemed aware. "Jess?" I called out, lifting the box gently, as if it might bruise. My wife came around the corner, drying her hands on a dish towel. When she saw what I held, her entire face changed. Not with surprise, not exactly, with knowing. "She sent that?" she asked, the words slower than usual. "Yes," I said. "It's from Sam and Peter." She stepped closer, towel clenched now in both hands. Her eyes didn't leave the box. "Don't open it." I blinked. "What?" "Don't open it." "Not yet." She looked at me like I was missing something obvious, something flashing red and screaming. Her voice lowered, the way you talk to someone who's just walked into traffic. "Can't you see?" That's when I felt it, the wrongness. The box was too light, not the kind of light that says jewelry or perfume. Light-like, hollow. When I shook it, something rattled. Papers, maybe. Nothing warm, nothing wrapped, no scent of home. I set it down carefully. My heart had started its quiet pound, the way it used to when I lost her at the grocery store for 2 minutes when she was 5. "I don't understand," I said. Jess didn't answer. She just stepped back, pale, like she'd seen something she couldn't unsee. I pulled the ribbon loose. The paper fell away like old skin. And inside was the end of something. Not a tie, not cologne. Not even a photo. A stack of documents, folded and clipped, dry and sharp, like they'd been handled too many times by strangers who didn't care. The first line read, "Petition for emergency guardianship." My name was listed as the respondent, and my daughter, my Samantha, had signed her name beneath the section labeled applicant. I didn't sit down. I couldn't. My knees didn't bend. My breath didn't deepen. I just stood there, looking down at the words that told me I wasn't a father anymore. I was a liability, a problem, an obstacle to be managed. Behind the papers, a single photo. Me, mouth open, finger pointing, red-faced, the day I told Peter to stay away from her accounts. The day I found out he'd been gambling. She'd defended him then, said I'd misunderstood, said I was tired, said I was slipping. They took that moment and turned it into a weapon. Jess finally spoke. "William," she whispered, I told you something was off." And then came the knock, not loud, but precise, 3 firm raps on the door. When I opened it, the black SUV was already parked crooked in the drive. The suit stepped out first, clipboard woman next. The officer came last, like punctuation. "Mr. Wells?" one of them asked. "We're here for a wellness check." A wellness check, on Father's Day. I didn't scream, didn't ask them to leave. I just looked back at the box, the ribbon still curled beside the coffee mug, and said the only thing I could. "You're late." Because by then, the damage had already been done. It was a Tuesday, 4 weeks before the box arrived. I remember because I had just changed the furnace filter. One of those things nobody notices until it stops working. My back ached from bending under the basement steps, and when I came up for air, Jess was stirring soup at the stove. "Sam called," she said without turning. I wiped my hands on a rag and reached for the kettle, not sure why the words made my chest pinch a little. "Oh?" I asked. She wanted to know if we got the check. I poured water for tea. I sent it last Friday, same as always. Jess didn't reply, but I saw the twitch in her jaw. She set the spoon down with more force than necessary. I sat at the table. "What else did she say?" Jess shrugged. "Just thanks, I guess. Said Peter's job hunt is moving along." That made me smile, if only a little. "Well, that's good. He's got that certification, doesn't he?" "She says he's interviewing." I nodded, waiting for something more. A question, an update. "How are you, Dad?" But Jess didn't continue. The soup bubbled. The kitchen ticked with clock sounds and quiet disappointment. "I miss her," I said finally, not sure why I felt the need to confess it like a secret. Jess turned then. Her eyes were tired, not angry, just worn. "She doesn't call unless she needs something," she said softly. I looked down at the table. The wood grain had started to split in one corner, a long narrow crack running toward the edge. I'd meant to fix it, like so many things. "She's just busy," I said. "Young people are." "She's not that young, William." I didn't answer. That night I went to the garage to look for wood glue. The workbench was cluttered with odds and ends, tools I barely used anymore, a wrench I couldn't grip right since the arthritis set in. I stood there for too long, pretending I was about to fix something. In truth, I just didn't want to go upstairs yet, because I knew what would happen. We'd sit in the bedroom, 2 books on the nightstands, 2 pairs of glasses. And Jess would close hers before she reached page 3 and turn out the light without a word. Not out of malice, out of knowing this conversation had already played out too many times in different clothing. She'd always been practical, sharp, saw through things I refused to. That was one of the reasons I married her. But that also meant she saw the gaps long before I did, the absences, the dismissals disguised as busyness, and she never needed to say it aloud. "You're still giving. She's already gone." The first dismissal didn't come in the form of silence, it came in the form of routine. A week later, Peter called, not Samantha, Peter. "Hey, Bill," he said, "quick thing, do you still have that guy at the credit union, the one who helped with the refinance?" I blinked. "Yes, I suppose I do. Why?" "Oh, just thinking maybe he could help us with something. We're looking at another car, maybe. Or maybe we'll consolidate the cards. You know how it is." I didn't ask how it was. I already knew. He never once asked how I was. I gave him the number, wrote it on a pad near the fridge. Jess saw it later, circled it once in pen and said nothing. Just circled it like she was drawing a halo around evidence. 2 days later, I received a voicemail from Samantha. "Hi, Dad. Just wanted to say thanks for always being there. You're the best. Love you." It was 32 seconds long. I listened to it 3 times. Not because I enjoyed it, because I couldn't tell whether it was sincere or strategic. After the 3rd listen, I deleted it. My finger hovered over the screen a second longer than necessary. Later that week, Jess and I went out to dinner. The kind of small-town steakhouse with sticky menus and 2 loud booths. Our waitress was kind, college-aged, overly bright, the way they train them to be when tips pay for textbooks. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed. Sam again, a text this time. "Just wondering if you could maybe help out with next month's electric. Peter's unemployment hasn't cleared." I stared at the words. Not hello, not how's your knee, not even sorry to bother you. Just a sentence shaped like a rope. Jess noticed. "Go ahead," she said, her voice even. "Pay it. I don't mind." "I know." And I did. Of course I did. When the check came, Jess reached for her purse before I could. I put a hand over hers. "I've got it." She looked at me then, not with gratitude, but with something colder, something that said, "That's the problem, Bill. You always do." In the car on the way home, she didn't speak, just looked out the window as the streetlights passed over her face in quiet stripes. That night, in bed, she reached over and turned out the lamp. "You know she's not coming for the 4th, she said into the dark. I didn't respond. She said they've got plans. "Maybe next year," I offered. Jess rolled away, her back to me. "She hasn't come for 5. I stared at the ceiling. "She's our daughter," I whispered. "No," Jess replied. "She was your daughter. Now you're a line item in her budget." And there it was, the first cut. Not from Sam, not from Peter, from Jess, because I think something in her had given up, not on me, but on hoping I'd stop reaching for something that wasn't reaching back. It didn't happen all at once. That's the cruelty of it. It wasn't one loud dismissal, no slammed doors or shouted names. Just a slow fade. Like fog inching across a window until you forget what sunlight looked like on the other side. It started with dinner. Jess and I used to eat at 6. Not late, not early. Just enough time to set the table, warm the rolls, pour the tea, and sit without hurry. But slowly our meals changed. First it was her appetite. "I'm not that hungry tonight," she'd say, spooning half a bowl of soup and leaving most of it untouched. Then it was the seating. We stopped eating at the table. Plates on our laps in front of the television, the news murmuring in the background. She never said it directly, but I felt it. That I wasn't much for conversation anymore. That the effort of making eye contact was heavier than the food itself. And I, too polite, too tired, too practiced in giving people space, said nothing. The coffee pot told its own story. For years I brewed a full pot every morning, 2 mugs each, one with cream, one black. Jess used to say the smell of coffee meant morning had started right. But now I make 1 cup, instant. Jess drinks tea. She keeps her favorite mugs in a separate cabinet. Not a secret, just a part. Like so many things now, on Thursdays she goes to her book club. I don't know what they're reading. I stopped asking. The last time I tried, she blinked at me like I'd interrupted something important. "It's not really your kind of story, Bill." She was right. They never are. On Sundays we used to drive to the farmer's market. I'd hold the basket and she'd pick tomatoes with that little frown she always made when checking for bruises. But the past few months, she's gone without me. "It's just quicker alone," she'd say, already sliding her sunglasses into place. I started walking the neighborhood instead, past the same hedges, the same cracked sidewalk where the Jenkins boy crashed his bike 15 years ago. I nod at neighbors I don't really know, and they nod back with that polite smile people give to old men they assume are lonely. They're not wrong. Inside the house, I still fix things no one asks to be fixed. The dripping faucet, the loose step on the back porch, the burned-out bulb in the laundry room. I keep doing them, not for thanks, but because it's something I can still do right. The mail still comes at 11:15. I check it daily. Most of it's junk now. Credit card offers, flyers. One time, a letter addressed to William Wells, resident, as if even the post office isn't sure I belong anymore. Sam used to send cards, Father's Day, birthdays, Christmas, but lately it's all digital. A forwarded meme. A text with 1-word replies. A gift card to a hardware store I no longer shop at. I remember the last time she visited. It was August. Humid and loud with cicadas. She came alone. Said Peter had a cold. I wasn't convinced. She stayed 2 hours, maybe less. Didn't take her coat off. Spent most of the time on her phone, then apologized with a kiss on my cheek and a vague, "Next time we'll stay longer." She left a candle in a paper bag on the counter. Said it was lavender for stress. It smelled like plastic. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at that candle for a long time. Then I put it in the guest bathroom, the one no one uses anymore. Sometimes I think about calling her, just to chat, just to hear her voice when it isn't rehearsed or laced with need, but I don't. Because I know how the conversation will go. She'll answer breathlessly, already on her way somewhere, and I'll hear Peter in the background or the beep of another call. "Hey Dad, can I call you back in a bit?" And I'll say, "Of course, like I always do." And she won't. The worst part isn't the forgetting, it's the remembering. Of what it used to be, of Sunday pancakes and bedtime stories, of science fairs and birthday hats, and that night she fell asleep on my chest after scraping her knee. She used to call me her anchor. Now I'm an obligation with a voicemail box. Jess tries in her way. She folds my shirts just the way I like. She remembers to buy the oatmeal cookies without raisins. But something in her eyes has gone still. Like she's waiting for me to admit what she already knows, that they've already moved on. We're the backup plan, the side door, the name on the emergency contact list that no one ever actually calls. And yet, I still send the checks, still answer the texts, still leave the porch light on when they say they might stop by. Not because I expect it, but because hope, even when quiet, has rituals. And mine involves a warm house, a working light, and the scent of coffee no one drinks anymore. There's a photograph in my study drawer, tucked under old tax returns and manuals for appliances we no longer own. I found it again a week before the box arrived, while looking for something else. A screwdriver, I think. It had slipped behind the folders, edges curled, colors faded. It's of me and Samantha. She's maybe 10. Gap-toothed, sunburned, squinting into a 4th of July sun. We're both holding up sparklers. Her other hand is wrapped around my forearm, anchoring herself to me like I was something solid and known. I remember that day clearly. The year was 1999. Clinton was still president, everyone was worried about Y2K, and we were staying at a lakeside cabin I'd borrowed from a friend at the paper mill. Samantha had packed her stuffed bear in her duffel, the one missing an ear. Said he couldn't miss fireworks. Jess had stayed behind that year. Her mother was sick, and she needed to be in Michigan. So it was just the two of us, father and daughter. I'd worried it would be awkward. A whole week. No mom to smooth over the rough parts, but it wasn't. We fished in the morning, even though neither of us had the patience for it. We ate pancakes for dinner 2 nights in a row. Watched cartoons in bed and made shadow puppets on the ceiling with the flashlight. One night, a thunderstorm rolled in. She crept into my room with her pillow under her arm, eyes wide. "Can I stay with you just until it stops?" I lifted the covers without a word. She crawled in and curled against me, her fingers finding mine under the blanket. "I don't like when it's loud," she whispered. I held her hand and said, "Then let's be quiet together." That morning, we made cinnamon toast and sat on the back porch wrapped in towels. The sky was still bruised with rain clouds, and everything smelled like wet bark and promises. She looked at me, no screen, no distraction, just looked and said, "I wish it was always just us." I didn't know what to do with the words. I knew they came from a child's mouth, swollen with sugar and sleep. But part of me wanted to believe she'd always feel that way, that I would always be her safe place. That belief carried me through more than I care to admit. Through her teenage years, the slammed doors, the defiant silences. Through college bills and late-night calls that started with, "Dad, are you up?" Through Peter, who never quite met my eyes. Through arguments I lost just to keep her close. I gave, not because I was trying to earn her love, but because I thought I already had it. There was another moment, years later. She was 27, a promotion at the architecture firm. She came over, glowing, clutching a bottle of champagne and a stack of blueprints. "You always told me I'd build things," she said, and I did. We sat at the table, just the two of us, her talking faster than I could follow, her eyes bright. She said, "I couldn't have done this without you." And I believed her. She meant it. Then. That was the year she started dating Peter. That was the year I offered to co-sign on their first condo, a small place near downtown with exposed brick and drafty windows. She hugged me when I said yes. "Best dad in the world," she said. I remember thinking, this is what it's all for. This moment. This seat at her life. But now I sit in the same kitchen with the same table, and the blueprints are gone. Replaced by overdue notices she forwards without comment. The girl who used to beg me to sit beside her during storms now only calls when she's surrounded by noise, and I've stopped offering. That photo, the one from the lake, sits beside me now as I write this. I took it out and placed it on the desk after the box arrived, after the papers spilled out and rewrote everything I thought I knew. I look at her face in that picture and wonder how we got here. How a girl who once said, "I wish it was always just us," could now petition the courts to say, "I'm unfit to be the man who raised her." How a father could become a case number, how love, real love, could fade into something strategic. I think back to that storm, the sound of thunder, her small hand finding mine, the quiet we held together, and I ask myself now, sitting in this house that used to be full, what happens when the storm ends and the hand lets go? The envelope arrived 2 weeks before the box. It was lavender, pale, like the color of the hydrangeas Samantha used to bring me for Father's Day when she was little, back when she picked them herself from the neighbor's yard and wrapped them in tinfoil. No return address, just my name, neatly written. Jess found it in the mailbox and placed it on the hall table like it might break. "It's her handwriting," she said. I nodded but didn't move to open it. Instead, I left it there. All afternoon. Like some small token of mercy, I didn't want to taint too soon. That evening, after dinner, meatloaf and peas, quiet bites and few words, I picked it up and sat in the den. I didn't rush. The paper was thick, expensive, not something you buy in a hurry, Inside was a folded card with watercolor leaves around the edges and the words "Just thinking of you" printed in cursive. Inside, Samantha's writing. "Hi Dad, just wanted to say I'm thinking about you this week. Hope you're doing okay. Peter's been having a rough time with work stuff, but we're hanging in. Hoping we can come by soon. Maybe bring lunch. Would love to catch up. Love, Sam." I must have read it 5 times. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd gotten in months. She hadn't asked for anything, no mention of money, no hint of urgency or guilt. Just lunch. A visit. Love, Sam. Jess watched me from the doorway. Her face was unreadable, arms crossed in the way she does when she doesn't want to interrupt, but can't help feeling wary. "She wrote?" I nodded. Jess hesitated, then stepped into the room and sat beside me. "Doesn't mean anything," she said softly. I looked at her, surprised. She didn't ask for a dime. Not this time. I wanted to argue, to say she was wrong, that maybe something had shifted. Maybe Samantha was remembering again, remembering the man who braided her hair before school when her mother died, who stayed up past midnight checking algebra homework with a flashlight because the power went out. "She wants to bring lunch," I said. Jess reached over and touched my arm, the way you do when you know someone's clinging to the edge of something delicate. "She'll come if she needs something," she said. "That's all." But I shook my head. Maybe not this time. And I wanted to believe it. For the next week, I kept the house tidier, polished the table legs, replaced the batteries in the smoke detectors, even washed the curtains, the ones in the den that hadn't seen a rinse in 5 years. Jess didn't say anything, but I saw the way she watched me. Like she was preparing herself for the moment I'd come back down. I even took the old photo off the shelf, the one from the lake. I dusted it, placed it gently on the mantel. Just until she visits, I told myself. On Wednesday, I called her. She didn't pick up. On Thursday, I texted. "Just checking in. Let me know when you want to come by. Looking forward to it." No reply. Friday came and went. Saturday afternoon, the sun warm for once. I waited by the window with 2 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Ham and cheese, her favorite when she was little, no knock at the door. By 7, the sandwiches had gone soggy. I wrapped them again and placed them in the fridge, though I knew I wouldn't eat them. Sunday morning, I got an email. From Peter, no subject line, just a brief note. "Hey, Samantha's been under a lot of pressure lately, and I've been meaning to reach out. Things have been tough. We're trying to figure out a few things financially, and I think she just didn't know how to ask. Hope you understand. We might still swing by. We'll keep you posted." I stared at the screen, my tea gone cold beside me. No apology, no mention of lunch. No, "Sorry we didn't show. Just, we didn't know how to ask." Jess was reading by the fireplace. I didn't say anything. Just closed the laptop and walked into the kitchen. The lavender envelope was still on the counter. I folded it back into the card, tucked it in the drawer beneath the phone where I keep pens and receipts and coupons that expired in 2014. Not thrown out, just put away. Later that night, I sat on the back porch alone. The air smelled of cut grass and warm stone. Somewhere, a dog barked. The kind of stillness that makes you remember your own breath. The porch light clicked on automatically at 8. I left it on. Out of habit, out of hope, out of something softer, something harder to name. But I didn't wait by the window this time. I didn't warm the sandwiches, and I didn't check my phone. Because that's the thing about hope. When it fades, it doesn't scream. It just stops knocking. I don't know the exact moment it happened, when I stopped being a father and started being a task. There wasn't a switch, no argument, no slammed door, no declaration, just erosion. Like rain on stone. Day after day, small things chipping away until one morning you wake up and realize you've been hollowed out. That morning, I didn't make the bed. Not out of laziness. Just, what was the point? The covers stayed tangled at the bottom like a nest abandoned midwinter. I left the blinds drawn, shuffled to the bathroom with my slippers scraping across the tile. Even the cat didn't follow me anymore. She used to wind around my legs while I brushed my teeth. Now she stays near Jess, curled on the quilted chair in the den like she knows that's where the warmth lives. I looked in the mirror. There was a man there. I think he used to laugh more. His hair used to be fuller. His eyes used to belong to someone who still expected to be seen. I splashed water on my face. It dripped down slow, settled into the creases around my mouth, my eyes, the hollow spot near my temple that deepened after my first heart scare. Funny how our bodies remember what our minds try to ignore. Downstairs, the living room hummed with silence. I sat in my usual chair. Jess was out, book club again, or maybe just grocery shopping. She's taken to running errands alone more often lately. Says it's faster. I don't argue. I haven't had the energy to argue in months. On the coffee table sat an envelope. Not the lavender one, that was long gone. This was white, plain. My name typed, not written. I knew what it was before I opened it. Another notice from the bank. Not a warning, just a statement. A reminder of how many transfers I'd approved this year. 14. Each one smaller than the last. Not because they asked for less. Because I had less to give. They hadn't said thank you since February. I set it down. My hands were shaking again. Not badly. Just enough to notice. Just enough to remind me that I am, in fact, getting older. There used to be power in my hands. They built Samantha's crib, repaired the railing on the back deck, changed the tire when she got her first flat, and cried on the side of Route 9. They held her upright when she took her first steps, wiped her brow when she was sick at 12, wrote checks for her tuition with careful strokes, even when I wasn't sure I'd make the mortgage. Now they just hold papers I'm not meant to read and bills I'm not meant to question. I rose to my feet, slow, careful, the way old men do when they've stopped trusting their knees, and walked to the window. It was raining, a soft, directionless rain, the kind that doesn't wash anything away, just makes the world quieter, and I realized something then. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I was tired. Tired in a way I couldn't describe, not like the tired after a long day of work or a poor night's sleep. Tired in the bones. In the places inside me that used to light up when the phone rang or when Samantha's car pulled into the driveway. I hadn't heard her voice in over a month, not in real time, only through old voicemails. Each one replayed so often I knew the cadence of her sighs, the artificial brightness, the way she paused before saying "love you," like it was a habit she wasn't sure still fit. I knew I should call her. I knew I should chase her down, demand answers, ask why my life had been rewritten in her handwriting. But I didn't. Because some part of me already knew. She'd decided I was inconvenient. And there is no fixing that. I've spent a lifetime being useful, a provider, a fixer, a presence. And when you stop being useful, you start becoming background noise. That's what I was now, the faint hum of a refrigerator, the click of a baseboard in the night. Familiar, steady, forgettable. Jess came home around noon. She didn't ask why I hadn't eaten. She noticed the untouched toast, the cold tea. She saw the envelope, said nothing, just placed a hand on my shoulder as she passed. That's the thing about long marriages. You stop narrating the obvious. She went upstairs to put groceries away. I remained by the window, watching the rain stitch lines across the glass. I didn't cry. I haven't cried in years. Not when my father died, not when I buried my dog, not when I sold the boat I swore I'd fix up once I retired. Crying is for grief that surprises you. This grief, it's old, settled. It sleeps in the guest room and leaves dishes in the sink. I turned away from the window and looked at the mantel. The photo was gone. Jess had taken it down last week, said she was dusting, said it didn't fit the room anymore. I hadn't asked where she put it. I didn't need to. Because that's what you do with people like me, the ones who've given too much, too quietly, for too long. You dust them off. You fold them away. You place them in a drawer until you need them again. And I no longer knew if anyone ever would. After they left, the silence was different. Not peaceful, not loud, just altered. The kind of quiet you notice only after something has been disturbed, like water after a stone sinks, the ripples still moving, even if the splash is long gone. The men in suits had taken their clipboards. The officer had offered a stiff nod. The woman with the laminated badge said, "If anything changes, Mr. Wells, don't hesitate to call." Her smile had been practiced. Kind but removed. Jess had handed them the petition, the one I'd pulled from Samantha's gift box, like a cruel magic trick. "Is this your signature?" the woman had asked me. "No," I'd said, "but it's my daughter's." That part didn't seem to matter. They didn't cuff me, didn't escort me to a hospital. They asked about my medications, my routines, my finances. I answered calmly. Honestly, I made sure not to sound defensive. Jess sat beside me the whole time, her hand near mine but not touching. Like she didn't want to make the moment more theatrical than it already was. They thanked us and left. That was all. 30 minutes that changed nothing on paper, but rearranged everything in my bones. When the door closed behind them, Jess turned to me. "You want tea?" she asked. I nodded, but I didn't move. Not for a long time. She brought the cup to me, where I still sat on the edge of the couch. It was chamomile, not my favorite, but warm. I held it in both hands, the way you do when your body forgets it can still be comforted. We didn't speak for the rest of the afternoon. At dinner, we didn't talk about Samantha, or Peter, or what the officer might report. Jess made stew. We ate in the dining room, like we used to before TV trays became the norm. She lit a candle. Not for romance, for steadiness, I think. That night, as I undressed for bed, I caught my reflection in the full-length mirror by the dresser. The man who looked back wasn't weak. He was older, yes, softer in the middle, greyer at the edges. But he stood straight. He met his own eyes, and for the first time in months, maybe years, he didn't look away. I slept lightly. In the early morning, before the birds began their rustling in the feeder, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Jess breathed evenly beside me. The room smelled faintly of lavender soap and worn flannel. I thought of my father. How he'd run the hardware store until arthritis made his knuckles like swollen knobs. How he never asked for help. How he never offered it either, not in words. But he gave me the shop key when I was 16. Trusted me to lock up alone. Trusted me to carry a name that meant something in town. That's what I've done all my life, carried names, reputations, responsibilities. And now they want to take even that. Call me incompetent, label me unstable. For what? For telling Peter the truth about his gambling? For cutting off the money pipeline that kept their weekends flush with cocktails and babysitters and new shoes? No. No more. I sat up, put my feet on the floor. I didn't feel righteous. I didn't feel angry. I felt precise. Like something inside had been folded for too long and was finally ready to unfold. In the kitchen, I poured a cup of black coffee. Real coffee. Not instant. The sky outside was pale blue with streaks of morning gold. I sat at the table, the same table where Samantha once did her homework, where Jess and I mapped out retirement plans and grocery lists. I opened the drawer by the fridge and pulled out the notepad. The one with the magnetic strip on the back that never stuck properly. On the top line, I wrote a single word. Change. No plan, no timeline, no drama. Just that. Because something had shifted. Not in the world. In me. I wasn't going to yell, or plead, or beg my daughter to remember who I was. I wasn't going to remind anyone of what I'd given. I wasn't going to dust off old stories in hopes they'd feel guilty enough to stay. But I also wasn't going to be erased. Not quietly, not conveniently. Not anymore. It would start with a phone call, to my lawyer, to the bank. To anyone who still remembered that I was a man who mattered. Not because I shouted, but because I was done whispering. I didn't tell Jess. Not because I was hiding anything, I just needed to do this one thing alone. Without discussion, without negotiation, without someone second-guessing if it was the right time. The morning after the wellness check, I took the Buick out of the garage, the old maroon one with the sticky radio dial and the cracked leather seats that smell like engine oil and peppermint. I hadn't driven in a while. Not far anyway, just to the post office or the pharmacy. But that day I filled the tank, rolled the windows down, let the air hit me like it used to when Samantha was small and we'd drive through the hills on Saturdays just to see where the road curved. I went to the bank first. The woman at the front desk recognized me. "Morning, Mr. Wells," she said. "You haven't been in a while." I nodded. "I'm here to make a few changes." She smiled, polite but distracted, and led me to a small office in the back with 2 bright lights and a plastic plant on the windowsill. The man who helped me, Greg, his name tag said, had a gentle way of speaking, like someone used to dealing with people who'd just lost spouses or were navigating messy estates. "I want to update my accounts," I said. "Beneficiaries, access, all of it." He tapped a few keys. "You still have your daughter listed on 3 of your accounts and 1 line of credit. Is that correct?" "It was," I said. "Not anymore." I brought documents, proof of identity, my will. The one I'd written years ago when everything felt simpler, when I thought the people I loved would always act in love. We removed Samantha, removed Peter, set up new passwords, moved the house into a trust with only 2 named recipients, my grandchildren. Not Sam, just them. I didn't cry, I didn't explain. I signed every page with a steady hand and left the office with a folder full of stamped forms and a strange lightness in my chest. Like a stone I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally rolled off. Outside, the sky had turned silver with rain clouds, but I didn't rush home. I stopped at the hardware store, bought a small lockbox, nothing fancy, black metal, a combination dial on the front. Then I drove to the notary, had the changes witnessed, filed a letter of intent, left copies with my lawyer. By the time I got home, it was nearly 4. Jess was out, the kitchen was quiet, the way I like it. I made tea, strong this time, with a squeeze of lemon, and took the lockbox into the den. Inside, I placed 5 things. The new will. A photograph, the one from the lake trip, now sealed in a plastic sleeve. A letter to my grandchildren explaining the trust. Explaining nothing else. The lavender card Samantha had sent, folded neatly. A note in my own handwriting. It said, "Your father was not confused. He just finally remembered who he was." I locked the box and slid it under the floorboard in the den, the loose one I'd discovered years ago while rewiring the baseboards. No one else knows it's there. That felt right, symbolic maybe. But it mattered. I wasn't doing this to be vindictive. I was doing it because a man has to know at some point in his life that he can draw a line in the sand, not in anger, but in self-respect. That he can say, "This is who I am, this is what I choose to leave behind." That evening, I lit a fire. Jess came home with groceries. I didn't tell her what I'd done, but I think she sensed it. She looked at me differently, not with pity, not with sympathy, but with something quieter, almost relief. She kissed the top of my head. "Dinner at the lake this weekend?" she asked. I smiled. "Let's pack Friday." She nodded, went to the kitchen, and I sat by the fire, not as a father or a husband or a man people needed something from, but simply as myself, still here, still whole, still worth the dignity of saying no. I wrote the letter 3 days after the paperwork was signed, not out of haste, not out of rage, just completion. It took me an hour. Not because the words were difficult, but because I wanted them to land with the weight of something final. No emotion, no apology. Just truth, pared down, plain and unmistakable. I used the good stationery, cream-colored, heavy, the kind Jess gave me last Christmas with a silver pen tucked into the box. I remember her saying, "You should write something that lasts." I never imagined this would be it. The letter was short. "Samantha, the next time you send a gift, make sure it isn't a knife. Your father." No greeting, no sign-off, no address at the top, no return address on the envelope, just my handwriting. Still steady, still mine. I walked it down to the blue mailbox at the end of Sycamore Drive, not our usual post office box. I didn't want Jess to see it, not because I was hiding it, because I wanted this to be mine, from start to finish. As I dropped the envelope in, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt silence, not emptiness, just stillness, like placing the last stone on a grave and brushing the dust from your palms. Walking back, I passed the old Jenkins house, the one with the maple tree that used to drop leaves like confetti in the fall. I remembered the year Samantha jumped in those leaves with her cousins, her cheeks flushed and her socks wet through. She'd begged me to rake a bigger pile. I did, of course, I always did. That memory didn't sting. Not anymore. It just sat inside me, the way good memories do when they've stopped needing to be fed. At home, Jess was clipping dead leaves from the fern near the porch. She didn't ask where I'd been, just looked up and gave a small nod. She knew. Not the details, but the shape of it. "How about steak tonight?" she asked. "On the grill?" I smiled. Haven't had steak on a Tuesday in years. Exactly. We ate on the patio, just the two of us, the air cool and soft, cicadas beginning their dusk chatter in the trees. There was no toast, no grand proclamation. Just the quiet clink of forks and the sound of two people sharing a meal that didn't ask for anything in return. That night, I took the framed photo from the drawer, the lake trip, the sparklers, her small hand gripping my arm, and placed it back on the mantel, not as a reminder of who she was, but of who I had been, who I still was. I didn't light a candle, didn't say a prayer, just looked at that younger man in the photograph and thought, "You did your part. And now it's time to rest, not in bitterness, in peace." The letter would arrive in 2 days. Maybe she'd read it aloud, maybe she'd rip it in half, maybe she'd say nothing at all. It didn't matter. I'd already said everything I needed to say, and for the first time in years, I didn't wait for a reply. We left for the cabin that Friday. No bags full of gifts, no invitations, no countdown to anyone else's arrival. Just a thermos of coffee, 2 travel mugs, and the quiet certainty that we were no longer waiting on anyone to join us. Jess drove. I watched the road wind through the trees, patches of sunlight flashing through the branches like some slow Morse code. It smelled like pine and memory, the way it always did. The cabin hadn't changed, still the same creaky steps, the porch with the bent nail that catches your sock, the chipped blue kettle on the stove that somehow still whistled like new. We unpacked in silence, not cold, not heavy, just peaceful. Like we were both guarding something gentle and didn't want to startle it. Jess opened all the windows. I lit the fireplace even though it wasn't quite cold enough to need it. But that's what we always did. Some rituals are worth keeping. That night, we sat by the lake. No phones, no news, no obligation. Just the sound of water tapping the dock and the fire crackling behind us. Jess brought out 2 glasses of wine, set one in front of me, sat beside me and leaned her head on my shoulder. "I like you better like this," she said. "Like what?" "Lighter." I smiled, small and real. "I feel lighter." We didn't speak for a while. The stars came out slowly as if unsure they were still invited. And I thought about everything that had happened, the box, the documents, the officer at the door, the letter I sent. But none of it felt sharp anymore. Because somewhere between the signature on that new will and the first spark of the fire tonight, something inside me had settled. I had said no, not out of spite, out of grace, out of dignity. Out of the understanding that love, real love, doesn't ask you to disappear. I still loved Samantha. I probably always would. But I no longer needed her to prove anything. I no longer needed her to call or apologize or show up with excuses wrapped in soft voices. Because I was still here, still capable, still mine. Later, I climbed into bed with the windows open. The breeze carried in the sound of crickets and something even softer, contentment maybe. I reached for Jess's hand under the quilt. She squeezed it once. We didn't need to say it. The next morning, I brewed real coffee, poured 2 mugs, sat on the porch and watched the sun rise over the lake, gold spilling over the water like it belonged there. No card in the mailbox, no knock at the door. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt chosen. By myself. That is the quiet triumph, not in being remembered, but in remembering yourself.